That is a disgrace, a national disgrace, and we haven't done enough, obviously. This administration hasn't done enough.
A lot of sugar. I just came back to complain.
Clint Eastwood was embarrassed in front of the whole restaurant, and the person mocking him had no idea it was his place. A rude waitress made fun of a man she thought was a nobody, laughing at him and his order. She didn't know he was the famous owner of the fancy spot. Her words hurt, but Clint stayed quiet and watched. Tune in to see the shocking moment when her world falls apart completely. Clint Eastwood's night at the Grand Oak. Clint Eastwood wasn't the type to make a grand entrance. He'd owned the Grand Oak for 6 months, but to him it wasn't about flashing his name or status. He had one rule: treat every customer with respect, whether they walked in wearing a designer suit or a thrift store find. He wanted the place to retain its heart, the kind of hospitality that made every guest feel welcome. But Rachel, a new waitress eager to climb the social ladder of LA's elite scene, hadn't caught on to this ethos yet. But tonight, as Rachel stepped into the Grand Oak with a plan that could shatter its very soul. Rachel had started working at the Grand Oak just a few weeks prior. She'd come with a glowing resume, recommendations from prestigious hospitality programs, and a knack for schmoozing high-profile guests. Her social media presence was polished, her curated feed a mix of gourmet dishes and snapshots with influencers who'd graced the restaurant. She'd spent the evening fluttering from table to table, ensuring that the tech executives and Instagram stars were lavished with attention. But when she noticed Clint sitting quietly in his corner, her enthusiasm turned into disdain. Clint wasn't the kind of customer Rachel thought deserved her energy. His plain attire and quiet demeanor didn't scream money, and to Rachel, appearances mattered. She approached his table with a carefully rehearsed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The man in the gray polo shirt looked up as she arrived, his expression calm and unreadable, the kind of look that had once captivated millions on the big screen. "Sir," Rachel began, her tone polite but with an unmistakable edge, "I couldn't help but notice you've been nursing that whiskey for quite some time. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar?" She gestured toward a sleek marble counter where a bartender was expertly mixing cocktails. Clint's eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. He took another sip of his drink and replied simply, "I'm comfortable here." Rachel hesitated, her carefully constructed facade faltering for a moment. She'd expected him to comply or at least offer some excuse. Instead, his calm response left her unsure. She glanced at a group of tech moguls waiting near the host stand, their tailored suits and designer shoes signaling a far more lucrative opportunity. She decided to push further. "This table," she said, her voice now carrying a hint of condescension, "is typically reserved for our dining guests. The bar area might be a better fit for your needs." She let her words hang in the air, hoping he'd take the hint. Across the room, Thomas, the restaurant's manager, was watching the scene unfold with growing unease. He'd worked at the Grand Oak for over a decade and knew Clint's face as well as anyone. He also knew the man's tendency to observe quietly, preferring to gauge the quality of his restaurant without fanfare. Thomas had seen Rachel's attitude before, her tendency to cater to the flashy and dismiss the understated. Tonight, her arrogance was about to catch up with her. Rachel's words caught the attention of Miguel, a young busboy who had been clearing a nearby table. Miguel had been working at the Grand Oak for 2 years, sending most of his earnings back to his family in Mexico. He'd recognized Clint the moment he walked in, having grown up watching his films with his father. Miguel's admiration for the man went beyond his on-screen persona. He'd always respected Clint's reputation for humility and integrity. Miguel's hands tightened around the bus tub as he overheard Rachel's dismissive tone. He wanted to intervene, but his position made him hesitant. Still, he couldn't ignore the growing tension in the room. Clint's response was measured, his voice low and steady. "I've been coming here for 6 months," he said, "and I've always sat at this table. I'll stay where I am." Rachel's frustration was evident. She glanced at her watch, then back at Clint. The group of tech executives waiting nearby was growing impatient, and she didn't want to risk losing their business. Her tone sharpened. "Sir, our menu is curated for a discerning clientele. Perhaps you're unaware, but our dishes reflect the caliber of our establishment." Nearby, an older couple shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They'd been regulars at the Grand Oak for years and recognized Clint immediately. The husband opened his mouth to speak, but his wife placed a hand on his arm, shaking her head slightly. They'd seen enough Clint Eastwood movies to know when a moment was about to take a turn. Rachel continued, her voice rising slightly as her patience wore thin. "This isn't a diner, sir. The Grand Oak is a luxury experience, and we aim to provide an ambience that reflects that. If you're looking for something simpler, there are plenty of other options." Miguel could no longer stay silent. He stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Miss Rachel, maybe I should get Thomas. He might want to handle this." Rachel turned on him, her irritation spilling over. "Stay out of this, Miguel. Go bus tables. That's what you're here for." Clint watched the exchange with interest, his calm demeanor unchanged. When Rachel turned back to him, she seemed determined to have the last word. "I've tried to be polite," she said, "but it's clear you don't belong here. This isn't some set from one of those old movies. This is a prestigious establishment, and I won't have you ruining the experience for our real guests." Tensions linger, but the night is far from over as the truth starts to surface. A quiet stand in a room full of glamour. The room fell silent. The tension was palpable, every eye in the restaurant now focused on the scene. Miguel's bus tub slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor with a loud clatter. Thomas, who had been making his way over, froze mid-step, his face pale. He set his glass down slowly, the movement deliberate and commanding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a brief call, he requested the ownership papers and renovation plans to be brought to him immediately. When he ended the call, he looked back at Rachel, who was now visibly shaken. "You see, Rachel," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I bought this restaurant 6 months ago. I've been sitting at this table every Friday since. Not for the luxury, not for the prestige, but because this place stood for something real. 50 years ago, the Grand Oak was a place where everyone was treated with respect, regardless of who they were or what they wore. That's what I wanted to preserve." As he spoke, Jerry, the restaurant's accountant, arrived with a leather portfolio containing the documents he'd requested. Jerry handed them over with a respectful nod, stepping back to let him continue. Rachel's face had turned pale, the weight of her actions sinking in. He gestured toward Miguel. "This young man recognized me not because of social media or status, but because he watched my films with his family. He understands something you don't. Respect isn't about appearances, it's about how we treat people." Turning back to Rachel, he offered her a choice. "You can leave and find another job where appearances are all that matter, or you can stay and learn what real hospitality means. Miguel will start training as a waiter. If you choose to stay, you'll learn from him and the rest of the staff what it means to truly serve others." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'd like to stay and learn, sir." He nodded, finishing his whiskey and standing up. "Good choice," he said simply. As he walked out, the room erupted in quiet applause, not for the celebrity in their midst, but for the lesson in humility and respect they'd all just witnessed. In the weeks that followed, the Grand Oak underwent a subtle transformation. Rachel's attitude softened, her eagerness replaced by a genuine desire to connect with guests. She learned to notice the details that mattered, not the designer labels or flashy attitudes, but the small moments of joy and appreciation from every customer. Miguel took his training seriously, moving up from busboy to waiter with ease. His confidence grew not just in his job, but in his ability to make a difference, one guest at a time. The regulars at the Grand Oak noticed the changes too. The older couple who had watched the scene that night became even more frequent visitors, often sharing stories with Miguel about their favorite films. The staff's camaraderie strengthened, their shared respect for the restaurant's core values, creating a bond that extended beyond their shifts. Even the influencers and tech moguls began to appreciate the sincerity of the service, their superficial expectations replaced by a genuine admiration for the warmth of the place. And every Friday, Clint Eastwood could still be found at his corner table, sipping his whiskey and observing the scene. He didn't need grand gestures or loud declarations. His presence alone was a quiet reminder that respect and authenticity would always have a place at the Grand Oak. The restaurant's success wasn't just in its luxury, but in its heart, a legacy of dignity and kindness that Clint had ensured would live on. Picture this: a fancy restaurant, posh vibes everywhere, and a waitress with an attitude so loud it practically echoes off the crystal chandeliers. Now throw Clint Eastwood into the mix. You know, the guy who's all about squinty stares and iconic one-liners, but let's dive deeper, because this isn't just any night. This is the night a clueless server decides to treat Clint like some regular Joe, not realizing he's the man who owns the whole darn place. Let's talk about the food, because let's be real, that's why we're here. Clint teamed up with a chef who knows his stuff, crafting a menu that's all about local, fresh, and ridiculously delicious ingredients. We're talking ribeye steaks that are so tender they practically melt, roasted beet salads that make you forget you're eating vegetables, and desserts that could win awards. The strawberry shortcake, a masterpiece of simplicity and flavor. Every dish tells a story, a nod to the land and the history of the place, but it's not just about the food, it's the people who make the magic happen. Clint's all about fostering a team that's as passionate as he is. He's the kind of guy who'll notice the busboy with a spark in his eye and help him climb the ranks. Case in point, Miguel. This kid started out clearing tables but had big dreams of becoming a chef. Clint saw that fire and made sure Miguel got the training he needed. Fast forward, and Miguel's not just part of the team, he's a rising star in the kitchen. Picture Clint strolling into his own restaurant, casual as ever. He's not one for grand entrances or letting people know he's a big deal. He'd rather sit quietly in a corner observing, soaking it all in. But on this particular night, fate had other plans. Enter the waitress, all attitude and no clue who she's dealing with. She's dismissive, maybe even a little snarky, and completely oblivious that the guy she's brushing off is the owner of the joint. Now, Clint's not the type to throw his weight around. He's got that quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need validation. So, he lets it slide, taking mental notes as the night goes on. It's not about revenge or proving a point, it's about understanding what's happening under the surface. Why is this server acting like this? Is it just a bad day, or is there a bigger issue at play? The restaurant changes and every dish carries a glimpse of something lasting, where every meal tells a story. When the night's over, Clint doesn't storm out or demand to see the manager. Instead, he takes his observations back to the drawing board. Maybe it's time for a staff meeting, a little refresher on what the Grand Oak stands for. It's a place of warmth, connection, and respect, values that Clint holds close to his heart. And if someone on the team isn't living up to that, well, it's an opportunity to make things right. But here's the thing about Clint, he's not just about fixing problems, he's about creating legacies. The Grand Oak isn't just a restaurant, it's a beacon of what's possible when you combine history, heart, and a little Hollywood flair. It's a place where the past meets the present, where every meal tells a story, and where even a less than perfect night can lead to something better. The Grand Oak has this magnetic charm that draws people in, not just for the food, but for the experience. Picture this: families gathering for special occasions, couples enjoying intimate dinners, and friends reconnecting over wine and laughter. It's more than just a restaurant. It's a haven, a space that feels like home no matter who you are. And Clint's fingerprints are all over it, from the ambience to the attention to detail that makes every visit memorable. Let's not forget about the behind-the-scenes magic that keeps the place running like a well-oiled machine. Clint's philosophy is simple: respect the land, honor the community, and never compromise on quality. That's why nearly every ingredient is sourced locally, from the tender steaks to the fresh herbs that garnish the plates. It's not just about supporting local farmers and reducing the carbon footprint, it's about creating a connection between the food on your plate and the land it came from. And then there's the decor. Every inch of the Grand Oak has been thoughtfully designed to blend old-world charm with modern elegance. The original wooden beams have been lovingly restored, antique furnishings add a touch of history, and the lighting creates a warm, inviting glow. It's the kind of place where you can feel the stories in the walls, where every detail whispers of a time when life was simpler, but just as full of meaning. As the years pass, the Grand Oak continues to thrive, its reputation growing as a destination for food lovers and history buffs alike. People come from miles around to experience the magic, drawn by tales of Clint's involvement and the promise of an extraordinary meal. But it's not just about the celebrity factor. At its core, the Grand Oak is about authenticity, about creating moments that matter, and about preserving a legacy that will endure for generations. Even Clint's personal connection to the place remains strong. He's a regular fixture, often seen quietly enjoying a meal in his favorite corner. He's not there to bask in the limelight. He's there to reflect, to observe, and to soak in the atmosphere he's worked so hard to create. For Clint, the Grand Oak is more than just a business venture. It's a labor of love, a tangible expression of his values and his vision. The Grand Oak stands as a shining example of what's possible when passion, purpose, and a deep respect for tradition come together. It's a place where history is celebrated, where community is nurtured, and where every guest is treated like family. Through his involvement, Clint has not only preserved a piece of Cherry Valley's heritage, but has also created a space where the simple joys of good food and good company can be savored and cherished. And there's even more to it. Beyond the day-to-day operations, the restaurant serves as a model for how businesses can integrate sustainability without sacrificing quality or experience. Clint's commitment to reducing waste and sourcing renewable energy is evident in every aspect of the Grand Oak. Solar panels discreetly tucked away power much of the restaurant, and the kitchen's zero-waste initiative ensures that even the smallest scraps find a meaningful purpose. These steps are not just good business practices, they reflect a philosophy rooted in respecting the environment and preserving it for future generations. The community connection is equally powerful. Clint has made sure that the Grand Oak is not just a restaurant, but a gathering place that gives back. Charity dinners, local fundraisers, and workshops with nearby schools have transformed it into more than a dining destination. It's become a hub of activity, fostering a deeper relationship between the restaurant and the people it serves. Local artists showcase their work in rotating exhibits, and musicians often fill the space with live performances that enhance the already rich atmosphere. It's this layered approach that makes the Grand Oak truly exceptional. From the first sip of wine to the last bite of dessert, every experience is meticulously designed to leave a lasting impression. Guests often comment not just on the food, but on the intangible sense of belonging they feel when they walk through the doors. That's the magic of Clint's vision, creating a place where everyone, from the staff to the patrons, feels a part of something bigger. What truly elevates the Grand Oak is the attention paid to the little moments. A guest once recalled how a waiter noticed they were celebrating a special anniversary and discreetly brought out a complimentary dessert with a handwritten note. It's these personalized touches that have transformed the restaurant from a dining spot into a memory-making destination. It's clear Clint's influence extends far beyond the menu. It's woven into the way people are treated and the memories they take home. For those who dine regularly, the Grand Oak is a second home, but for newcomers, it feels like a hidden gem. Stories of encounters with Clint himself have become part of the allure, shared in whispers or proud declarations to friends. Spotting him quietly observing the restaurant's rhythm, sometimes exchanging a few words with the staff, only adds to the magic. It's a reminder that this legendary figure isn't just an icon of the silver screen, but a man with a genuine love for creating something meaningful. Was Rachel's transformation at the Grand Oak a genuine change of heart, or just a survival tactic in a world obsessed with appearances? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe for more stories.